Hi, I'm Dr. Kirsten Lauritsen. I'm a personal functional medicine practitioner for high performers and professional athletes. And I've worked with athletes in many different sports, from the U.S. sailing team to endurance sports and triathlon, CrossFit, and professional tennis players across the board in any sport. Maintaining a foundation of a healthy body and mind is crucial for long-term success. This is the podcast that will show you how to apply the principles of a healthy body and mindset to achieve high performance, all from the inside out. This is the Fit and Healthy Athlete Podcast. Hey, hi, hello, welcome to the Fit and Healthy Athlete Podcast. I am so excited to have you here. This is a podcast all about being a fit and healthy athlete. And the reason I started this podcast is because I noticed, after working with athletes for years in many different sports and at many different levels, I have seen the same similar struggles in athletes trying to achieve their best performance that they know that they're capable of, but then something is preventing them from doing that has to do with their body and their health. So the themes and the topics that you are going to see on this podcast are going to relate to that. It's to helping you be able to leverage really good health and knowing what you can do in which areas, how to identify which area you need to work on. And second, what can you do in order to work on those areas and being able to leverage your health for optimal performance. One of the things that is really critical when it comes to this whole idea, this whole theme or topic of healthy athletes performing really, really, really well, is that it's not just about genetics. It's not just about training. It's about, if you want to achieve that peak performance, you cannot do it without peak lifestyle habits, essentially. So that's making sure that your nutrition is all really healthy, really good stuff that you get from vegetables and fruits that are grown in really good soil, and that you get from getting if you're not plant-based, if you eat meat, it's about getting it from really healthy, really good sources. It's about also understanding what you need in your daily nutrition in order to really support your lifestyle with you and your sport. It's also about you rest and sleep and hydration and fueling properly and managing stress, as well as really good quality relationships. These are all areas that are really important for achieving that peak performance, but they're also the ones that are so easily left out. And they're ones that are so easily tabled and put on the back burner. So that is why I am here and producing this podcast, is because I think that it is an area that a lot of athletes can improve in, and also see the really big benefits from that as well. The other reason that I am making this first episode as well, because I know these get buried, but I wanted to share my story because I had an athlete in the office just this last week, and they were asking me, well, have you experienced this before? And it sort of launched me into my story, and they were like, oh my gosh, I had no idea. So, and most of this podcast isn't about me, it's about you. So I want to make sure that you at least know my story if you're interested and you want to hear it. And it will always be here if you ever want to refer back to it. But most of the time, the rest of this podcast is going to be all about you. So really quickly, so I've been an athlete all of my life. I grew up skiing by the time I was 3 or 4 years old. I was in gymnastics by the time I was 3, and I did gymnastics up until about 12 years old. At about 12 to 13 is when I would have transitioned into kind of more competitive gymnastics, and I certainly thought that I was headed that way. At the same time, I was also playing soccer. I also was playing, I think actually it was after that I started playing volleyball and basketball and softball, and did a little tennis in there, but also all the different other types of water sports. Super, super active kid. I never played, at the collegiate level, but I played sports all throughout middle school and high school, and also did a lot on my own of separate, kind of one sports, which would be like snowboarding and things like that. I put a lot of my time into that because I loved it. And so going back to being a gymnast at about 12, we had an option to move forward, but my mom had been listening to how my ankles hurt, my knees hurt, my low back hurt. And I think in essence, I was like falling apart. So, and part of what drove me to do what I do now is being that kid that really would have liked to have pursued maybe gymnastics a little bit more. But now also looking back, like I wasn't the right body size to really be competitive in that sport, but still it would have been nice to not have had some of that joint ache and pain and sprained ankles and all of those sorts of things at such a young age. And part of me becoming a chiropractor had to do with that. I have a doctorate in chiropractic, and then I also paired on top of that a master's in human nutrition and functional medicine. And I have 3 other degrees on top of that. I have a bachelor's of arts in psychology and neuroscience, as well as Spanish. And then I also have another bachelor's of science in human biology. So along my journey, I've picked up a lot of degrees because of my different interests, of course, but I also have seen where my health journey really started. And then that really was part of what guided me to getting the degrees that I have and the way that I now help and serve my people. So when I was 12, 13, I got my, period, which is normal. You usually get your period around that time. And they were super painful. They got more and more painful as they started. And we didn't really know what it was, but later down the road, we figured out that it was endometriosis, which plagues actually quite a few female athletes. Endometriosis can be quite a difficult thing to deal with. But that was where a lot of it started. And then as I got into my mid-teens, this is my health journey, and this makes sense. So stay with me here. But I didn't have terrible acne, but it was enough for me to be really uncomfortable with it. So we did the whole dermatology thing. I went through so many different types of creams and things, which who knows, honestly, what was in those. Looking back now, a lot of medications that are put on your skin can also cause a lot of hormonal imbalances and be really, really problematic for the human body. The other thing is I then got to a point where I said, this isn't working. What can you do? And at the time, my dermatologist said, well, what you can do is you can take a antibiotic because a lot of acne is just bacteria on the skin. It's like a bacterial overgrowth. Well, knowing what I know now, we wouldn't have gone that route. But that back then, I mean, it made sense. And my mom was just trying to help me out. Right. And she knew that this was really bothering me. So I took those antibiotics and I took them for a while. It was a somewhat consistent round. Right after that is when my endometriosis probably peaked or started to peak at its worst. And then I also started getting migraines. Then I went on to college and I started getting and part of this has to do with not only having some of that stress that's going on internally, and I'll link why the antibiotics were such an issue in a little bit, but I, moved on to college, and then with the stress of moving to college and then having some of these other pieces, I started to realize that I actually started to realize what ended up happening is I started getting a lot of stomach pain and my digestion started to really break down. So I stopped wanting to eat. I lost 15 pounds. Most people gain 15 pounds when they go to college. I lost that 15 pounds and I started down this really unhealthy path of not eating because it hurt to eat, which I know now on the flip side, so many people who have GI health complaints and concerns and issues, a lot of them also have a lot of fear around food because it hurts to eat. It's literally one of the worst things. And then part of also what then played into that is that I liked the way I looked, right? I lost 15 pounds. It was the smallest I've ever been. And it just was a really, really, really unhealthy time. Also at that time, my endometriosis was really, really awful. And, it was just a learning experience, but it was a messy time as far as my health goes. So then what ended up happening is my sister introduced me to CrossFit. So I started learning about how to lift weights and how to get strong. And then that introduced me at the time to paleo, which, say what you will about it, but the paleo diet is really great in terms of learning how to eat good quality food. And you can do and adopt the paleo-ish style of eating, but still be higher carb. So yeah. But that being said, it was really helpful for getting processed foods out of my diet. It was really helpful in getting inflammatory foods out of my diet, and then really helped me make that shift into eating healthier. And then later down the road, I ended up on a journey of going on a journey with many different alternative care physicians. One was a chiropractor for a while, and then I transitioned on to a acupuncturist as well as a naturopath, and then many different chiropractors were kind of in the realm there as well. And at that same time, I then went to chiropractic school, found functional medicine, and decided to get my master's in that. And then that all was part of my healing journey of figuring out how to get my endometriosis stuff, as far as what was going on with pain during my periods and cycles, to get that under control. I mean, it took me 10 years to get to that point, but it was all a journey, right? I worked with many different physicians to get to this place. And it wasn't that they didn't help me. It was that they helped me at that certain time. They were the right person as I was on that journey at that time. And then things shifted and it was time for me to move on to the next person. And I think that's one of the reasons why I love doing what I do and working in the field that I do, is because I recognize that I am only one small piece in a person's puzzle and along their journey to get them to the goal that they're wanting to achieve. And I'm happy to be, and I'm honored to be a part of that journey for however long it is that I am meant to be of service in that partnership. So this is part of how I got to where I am today. The reason, though, going back, why antibiotics and having multiple rounds of antibiotics was such a problem, and this is going to be a theme that you will hear later on down the road with many of the podcast episodes coming up, is that when you take antibiotics, and especially when you take them for a little too long, what ends up happening is it can not only kill off some of the bad bacteria, but because it was killing off the bacteria on my skin, it was also wrecking my GI tract, my GI tract. And the reason why then ultimately I started getting migraines and then I ended up having such digestion issues and pain is because once there is a leaky gut, if there's dysbiosis, if there's a lot of imbalances in the GI tract, it might be an imbalance in the large intestine, but that whole environment, if it gets thrown off, it can also interfere with your stomach. And then that can cause things like heartburn and pain when eating and indigestion and all of the things that plague the stomach that you would think would just have to do with the stomach alone can be a result of things that are just not quite right with the large intestine, and vice versa. If there's something that's wrong with the stomach, it can affect everything downstream as well. So this is one of the reasons why I do what I do, is because then what I realized is that I've got to fix my GI tract on the flip side, right? When I realized there were a lot of things going on, like it started just with exercise and going to CrossFit, and it started with paleo and just learning a little bit about what different types of foods do to your body. Then it went on, especially when I found functional medicine, it went on to what is GI health? What is detoxification? What is mental health and spiritual health and emotional health? What is keeping keeping your immune system healthy? What about your cardiovascular system and your hormones? All of these different areas, they all go together. So it wasn't just about, I got to fix my gut to fix my gut, but it was also to fix my skin as well. Cause even still, I suffered with skin issues the whole time. They never quite went away. And it was only until recently that I finally did something different with my GI tract and I saw improvements in my skin. But you can just see how these journeys, it's something that you're just constantly working on, and you're just improving, bits over time as you learn a little bit more. And that's the reason why I do what I do, is simply because I've learned so much along my journey of trying to get rid of migraines because they were preventing me from running, because I would go out running in the cold and no matter what I did, I'd get a migraine because that was just a really big trigger for me. Or being able to actually work on a day that I had the first couple days of my period. If you start recognizing that if migraines are taking away 2 to 3 days a week, and then if you also have a period that's also taking another 2 to 3 days out of your month, right? So that's potentially a week or more of your entire month that's spent, first off, not feeling well, but second, not being able to do what you want to do. Maybe that's train, maybe that's work, maybe that's study, maybe that's play. I don't know, whatever it is that you want to do. Or heck, if performance is your job, you can't spend a week out. It's just not going to happen. So that's the reason why I went on this journey, is because I wanted to heal myself. And I knew that it was possible because I knew that other people had done it. And I also then at that point, beyond that, once I started realizing that there was a whole lot that you can do to affect your health, I started realizing more about how this can affect your performance. And as I started looking deeper into gut health and into nutrient deficiencies and into fueling and hydration for performance, and then also how heart rate variability and resting heart rate and VO2 max, and I mean, those are just keywords, right? But like all of those different areas, as you start researching them a little bit more and looking into supplementation, you start to realize that there is a whole lot more that's connected, that it has to do with your health, and it's part of being able to train as well as you possibly can and get the benefits from that training as quickly as possible so that you can keep on seeing that improvement. There's a lot of layers that go on underneath that. That's not just about showing up to practice every day. And then my own personal journey took me from CrossFit to triathlon, which I really enjoyed, getting to know a different sport and getting to know a lot of different areas that have to do and specialties that have to do within triathlon. And throughout that journey, I learned a ton. And part of now what I do is I put a lot of those pieces together for athletes so that they can perform at their absolute best. And that's why I do what I do. So I hope that you join me on this podcast. I hope that you subscribe and you stick around. And if along the way you enjoy it, I would love it if you would not only subscribe, but you would also leave us a review. It really helps to get this podcast out to more people. And that would be amazing. So I hope you stick with us, and I will see you on the next episode. Take care. Hey, did you know that up to 70% of athletes may be deficient in at least one micronutrient, if not potentially deficient in two or more? Micronutrient deficiencies like vitamin D, iron, calcium, vitamin E, B12, B9 are super common in athletes, and they can lead to things like fatigue. They can lead to injuries and fractures, getting sick a lot and missing practice, to unexplained pain, and a lot more. On the flip side, though, athletes who corrected nutrient deficiencies saw improvements in VO2 max, vertical jump, grip strength, force, improved delayed onset muscle soreness, and a lot more. That's why I created the Strong to the Finish Line free guide for athletes like you to be able to train and compete symptom-free so that you can have the confidence and the power to perform at your best. Get this guide for free at drkirsten.com/finishstrong.